The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Hi, welcome to the Mind, Body, Spirit show today. This is going to be a little bit different, but actually you say, how come you're speaking about the environment? Well, it affects our health. And I want you to be open-minded, okay? When you hear this information, you say, well, you're on one side of this picture. No, I want you to determine through the facts, global warming, fact or fiction, or is it a combination of the two? And make up your own mind. But let's get started, okay? And this is a very complex subject, but some things are more easy to understand than other. I mean, in some ways, it's exhausting. You know, it's complex. It's a huge scale. I mean, to the point you're sick and tired of hearing it, that you can't really make up your mind. So start reading, watch some of these TV shows, maybe watch Al Gore's show, The Inconvenient Truth, which I watched a couple nights ago again. And then he has a follow-up to that, and he's very sincere. And what he's showing is that for the last 20 years or so, maybe more like 15 years or so, the temperature of the Earth, although it's in kind of going like this upwards, all of a sudden, boom, it's really accelerating, and he shows you that on a graph. So let's explore this with an open mind, okay? So it takes some imagination, and you may become fatigued, be open-minded, read a couple of books. So what do we know? You know, we know there's some pollution going on. We know that much. When you hear about the ocean, for example, all the plastics that are accumulating in the ocean, boy, isn't that really scary? I mean, when you get miles and miles of nothing but plastics and it's killing off fish, for example. So we know we are polluting the earth. We're cutting down a lot of trees. We know that, and they absorb carbon dioxide, removing the CO2 that's accumulating around our earth, and that's concerning. Ocean temperatures indeed rising. Then I saw and read that Miami really is the city that in the world that's would be most exposed to oceans rising. Yeah, if they continue this way, Miami will be underwater, which it periodically does already. Number one city in the world, okay? And then we hear about the forest being cut down in the Amazon, in Brazil particularly, where the new president is encouraging that for economic development. In a way, you can see his point, that people need to eat, make a living, okay? But then again, the trees absorb a lot of the CO2, so he's removing that, and we may be critical of that, but we could be understanding too. And we know the ice caps are melting. We watched that when I watched Al Gore's. I went there and filmed them, and you can see them just falling down. You hear about it every year because the temperature of the earth is rising, and then the ice falls in the ocean, into the dark ocean. And then methane is released, which is one of the worst causes of global warming, because methane gets caught in the shield that's around the earth about 20 miles up, very thin shield, and it's getting thicker and thicker. So in essence, we have a greenhouse effect, okay? We have a greenhouse effect, and the temperature rising is increasing in rate. So it's, in some ways, it's difficult to explain, and to others it might seem a little easier. So also, some difficult things to explain now is that we have much more 30 miles an hour storms. For example, the speed of the wind has increased, okay? Also, we changed the polar vortex. Why does a curve, when you watch the CO2 and the temperature of the Earth kind of going like this? That's because of the vortex of the Earth. The Earth turns over, so it cools for a while and then heats up, but the temperature keeps on rising. For example, Chicago at times is colder than Antarctica. Yeah, why is that? Because of the heating of the Earth. We don't get excited about it anymore because we see it, down the line. We hear New York legislature considering building a huge wall around Manhattan, which is surrounded by water. I lived in New York, so I'm familiar with the water there. They're thinking of building a 10-mile wall around Manhattan. Well, why are they talking about that? Because they're thinking the oceans are rising because the temperature is rising, the ice caps are falling into the ocean, and there's more water around. But no one's getting too excited about it when they should, because the changes are occurring quickly. Remember, I told you about the graph looking like this, and Al Gore showed, look at it. I mean, the Earth is kind of going like this, and all of a sudden it's going like this. He has a straight up. I think we maybe should pay some attention to that. So, like in Florida, where I had a second home, we notice insurance rates are going up because of more storms and more tornadoes and coming through there. We accept forest fires anymore, like in California, like it's routine. When you can see that it's another sign of the Earth becoming hotter. More fires all the time, and it's not just in California. It's in Africa, India, other parts of the Earth. We have increased deaths from record heat waves. That's been actually recorded, but it doesn't hit the news that often. So it's intermittent information, so we don't tend to act on it. It's the way human brain is, okay? So it's not an easy story to tell, and it's not a good story. We don't want to hear it. Newspapers don't publish it because it's not a great story. So it fails to convert us and interest us. Some of us are interested, but not to the point that people are willing to march for it, like civil rights, for example, which was necessary and threatening. But we occasionally will have some students gather up, and sometimes there will be people gathering about the environment, but it's not a big thing the way it's going to happen. So it's a crisis of culture and our imagination. It's sort of like I was reading Justice Frankfurter, a Supreme Court justice, in the Second World War. There was a man came from Germany. He worked his way to the United States because he had witnessed some of these concentration camps, and he wanted the world to wake up and do something about it. So he knew the story. He'd been in the ghettos. A Jewish man, he'd been in a Hungarian ghetto, I think, and a concentration camp, and he told the whole story to Justice Frankfurter. And you know what he did about it? Hardly anything. How's that possible? Because the story was beyond his imagination. And I think this story here of global warming is beyond the imagination of a lot of people, because the predictions are dire, like 20, 30, 50 years from now. For example, I was even reading today's newspaper. 50% of the birds are maybe dead. Yeah, yeah. And we're destroying our planet. I know in Fort Wayne we used to have huge pigeons fly over the city to the point that it darkened the sky. You know what we did? They would literally fly over Michigan and Fort Wayne. It would darken the sky. We killed them all with guns. The last one was in Cincinnati. So man is affecting their environment, okay? So we're not paying enough attention, so we're indifferent to it, okay? So, but we do respond emotionally more through pictures. So throwing some pictures out there might excite the public a little more, and that's the reason you do see it some on TV, but that's why watching Al Gore's TV shows there with the real, actual pictures, I think will maybe affect the way you think about it. So we have biases, you know, but pictures can affect it. And I was sitting around a table the other day, and 4 of us were discussing global warming, and it's a difficult thing to discuss. We had 4 different opinions. I know in limiting diabetes, for example, the one thing I've had diabetics change when I show them pictures of things that could happen to them, like amputations and having a heart attack, and that seems to affect them more than anything that I tell them. So pictures are important. So it's our ability to visualize maybe the future, or maybe like in today's paper, a picture of a bird. I love pours out. And the proximity to the problem. Are you actually seeing? Do you live near the forest? Or you live near the flooding, for example, and see the condition worsening? Then we're more likely to respond to it. Actually, what's happening is there is a planetary crisis occurring, but we have a little bit of apathy about it. Okay, it doesn't affect me tomorrow. I won't live long enough to feel the effect, but our kids will. Okay, so it seems abstract, distant, isolated. It's not a beam pointing necessarily right at us all day. Okay, so that's a problem. So we do have climate change deniers. Okay, although 97% of the climate scientists say global warming is occurring, it's going to have huge effects on us, because and that the majority of it at this time is from human activities. What's good about that actually is if it's done by human activities, we could change, make it better. Kind of like diabetes, you don't need sugar, those diseases don't occur, or they go away. So this smells of opportunity, and since what we eat greatly affects global warming, it also gives us some control, something that we could do. That's what I like about that. Okay, so the changes we have when it hits home viscerally to us, then we might change. Okay, and this is really based on science. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize when he said, "We have a slow, deliberative. When we deliberate something, it's usually a slow thing. We gather some information, we read some more, we listen to friends, we watch a show, and we deliberate about it." Okay, and this is what we're doing. But we do have a fast, intuitive mode, if you feel it. If you feel it. So if you're living near it, you're more likely to feel it and react to it. Very interesting, okay? So, but to mobilize people, you have to make them emotional, that something will happen to them, that maybe their children will have not enough food or live a short lifetime. Remember that we've had a number of times that the earth has been too cold or too hot, actually almost 4 times at least, and the 5th was an object from the cosmos that landed in the ocean that that brought up so much dust that the animals died. So we've had five instances where a lot of life died on Earth. Okay, we'll talk more about it a little bit later. So what could we do? Things that could affect the lilies. Plant a tree. Welcome, plant a tree. I've planted about 20 trees. I know of a lady I spoke to the other day who planted, and I say this to her, 3,000 trees. Yeah. So, because remember that absorbs CO2 and releases oxygen. So it's something you could do. You could recycle. That's something you could do. But the effects are some, but not huge. What you eat will change a lot more. Eating animals pollutes the world a great deal more. The food that they eat, the pastures you have to clear, for example. But other things you could do, install solar panels. This is getting to be a huge thing. Like in China, they have some cities now where they've put in so many solar panels, they're energy free. It all comes from the sun, okay? No coal, okay? The electricity is all from the sun. There are actually a few cities in the United States that are dependent totally on solar panels. There's Georgetown, Texas. Yeah, the oil country. Georgetown, Texas. I saw an interview, I think it was in the Al Gore show, where he's being interviewed, that they were going to get all the energy from solar. Then there's France, which use mainly atomic energy. We all hear, it's so dangerous. Well, actually the least polluting energy source besides the sun is atomic energy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, France went into that big time. I think you have to develop a system of building a plant that's quite safe. And what the U.S. could do, just duplicate it. Instead of all this rigmarole, although we do have a lot of atomic energy in the United States, which most people don't know. We actually have a significant amount. So installing solar panels, okay, that appears to be even better than wind turbines, although that has some effects and creates a lot of jobs. Yeah, actually a lot of jobs are created by solar panels and these windmills. Create a lot of jobs. Eat locally, so that you eating organic, fresh vegetables. For example, minimal meat. I didn't say be a vegan or vegetarian, but minimal meat, for example, because meat has tremendous effect on the environment. Composting has value. Buying organic food. Use a hybrid car or no car. But most people get to work with a car, so that's a toughie, okay? And so there's a project called Drawdown Project with an organization. You can get it on the internet. And they have about 200 suggestions. I wasn't going to read all those to you today. Another book I might suggest is Dire Predictions by Michael Mann, M-N-N, to gather more information, okay? The other thing, we do in America is elect a president who thinks climate change is not a hoax. And that can be problems. There's been different reactions from different presidents, okay? We withdrew from the Paris Agreement. So I listened to that on Al Gore's show, and some of the details. I know some of the details. Even if you don't totally agree with it, even if you think we will have to pay too much, you can renegotiate it. Just to withdraw from it, to me and a lot of other people, is a big mistake. I think it's a big mistake. But you can make up your own mind, see what you think of it. So what the problem is, what you don't know about is big oil just like the cigarette companies, the cigarette companies lied. You know that. They all swore cigarettes have no effect on your health. And I saw that when I was looking at the patients that were dying from smoking. Industry is involved here. A lot of money is involved here. Let's face it, it's about the money. And these companies have come together, and they're willing to lie in front of Congress. And Congress is getting bribed with money, and they're not willing to act. They're not willing to act. I watched some of the testimonies on that. So our approach is not adequate, okay? We're thinking about it, it's there, but we need a world project, and for that you need a world organization. And Al Gore, for example, he taught people about climate change, and he was vice president for a while, and then that Supreme Court overturned his election. It was in Florida, where in a way it was shameful, but in a way it freed him up to work on this project, which is very important. And he's working on it, and he would teach people how to spread the information. First he had small groups, 50 people, and eventually he had thousands. And it's still going on. So in my heart, frankly, Al Gore, watch his shows, and he'll grab your heart too. And I made to go to one of his teaching courses, because if we don't get involved, and the changes are occurring quickly. So electricity uses about 25% of global warming, so to switch to solar panels would certainly be a great thing. Batteries store energy, and they are of value. Animal agriculture accounts for about 24% of the greenhouse effect. Remember, the shield around the Earth, very thin, 20 miles up, is gathering all the methane, the CO2, and the nitrous oxide. So animal agriculture affects that too, and it can be more because we got to cut down the farm. We cut down the trees. And Michigan used to be almost all trees. The majority have been cut down. Can you imagine the greenhouse effect? From the animals and the corn, the genetically modified corn, they're growing in Michigan and Iowa, for example, and the trees cut down, where this effect is had on global warming. Manufacturing accounts for 24%, transportation 14%, buildings about 6%, so it adds up. The Paris Agreement said that they agreed on what they would like to do is keep the Earth from going up 2 degrees and lowering it to 2 degrees Celsius is like 3.6 Fahrenheit. Okay, and they have a number of suggestions, which are on page 58. And I'll give you a few of those. A book that I encourage you to have a look at here, that encourage you to read, and what Jonathan Safran Foer, F-O-E-R, saying is, we are the weather. We are the weather. What we eat, how we get transported, how we're affecting what we're eating, the agriculture, for example. So she says, saving the planet begins at breakfast. Yeah, what you're eating there. So let me read a few things there from the Paris Accord there. What they think, sea levels will rise about 1.6 feet, flooding coastlines across the globe. Miami being number one on the list. Probably armed conflict will occur by an estimated 40% because of climate changes. Greenland will tip into irreversible melt. It's mainly ice now and snow. That will melt, so the oceans will rise. And between 20 and 40% of the Amazon will be destroyed. I'll just read a few more here. Human mortality will dramatically increase because of heat waves, floods, and droughts. Okay, 400 million people will suffer from water scarcity, shortage of water. Okay, half of the animal species will face extinction. Many have died already in time. Wheat yields will reduce 12%, and global per capita production will drop by an estimated 13%. So the environment will have tremendous effects on the economics of the earth. And the animal agriculture has a tremendous effect on the environment, as I said before, because we have to clear the land, cut down the forest, then we put the animals in there, and they put out a lot of methane gas themselves, and they're eating mainly corn. It comes in Kansas City. They have a trough 35 miles long, which full of corn, which is grown in the fields of Iowa, for example. All the trees have been cut down, and they're eating genetically modified corn, which is not healthy for us. So you are what the animal ate, what they ate. What the animal ate is, when you eat the animal, is what you're eating, okay? So it's a losing hand. So the most affected are the poor, because they're eating fast foods, which all the nutrients have been drained from, so they're more likely to get diabetes and its 50 diseases. And so the environment, and I tried it last night after we played tennis to three of us sitting around, is that environment makes a poor conversation. We all got different opinions, and some are pretty strong. It annoys people. And then you have some that are zealots. Maybe after rereading all these books again and reading more and watching TV shows, maybe I've turned into a little bit of zealot too. But I appreciate other opinions and tell them to me. So we cannot save the planet unless we eat a little less animal products. Yeah, they're a huge cause of it, and I'll tell you in detail how huge it is after a little bit. And so changing the way we eat, as Jonathan Ferrer says, will change the power grid. Yeah, will change the power grid. Perhaps she suggests that perhaps no meat for breakfast or lunch. Okay. I'm not a vegetarian, but I don't eat much because I'm satisfied that the vitamins and minerals that are in vegetables are much healthier for you. I have a smoothie, vegetables. I don't eat much meat. Besides, I know the cruelty occurs to animals when we eat it. I've read about what they do to chickens. At birth, all males are killed because they don't lay eggs. Okay, the females are fighting each other in these factory farms, so they cut their beaks off because they peck themselves to death. Yeah, factory farming is 99% of animal agriculture now. Mm-hmm. They're all at the trough. The cows are at a trough eating corn. So when you're eating meat, what are you eating? Corn. You go to a fast food place and you buy their hamburger. Those are the remnants of the animals they're killed. That's what you're eating. Hmm? I read all that, and the cruelty to them, and the pigs, for example, I just can't take it, so I don't eat them. I saw Oprah's movie on that, actually, which made me cry. So I just don't believe in eating animals amount to anything because of that. I have some eggs in there, maybe a chicken now and then, a piece of turkey. Although when you read about the new way of farming, what they do to turkeys is sad too, just like the chickens. Okay, so changing the way we eat is like changing the power grid. I mean, it's difficult. Actually, this Foer, F-O-E-R, also wrote, author of Eating Animals, another book you might have a look at. So global warming is a house of fire. We are on fire, okay? The longer you wait, the more difficult it has become. You see, it's a fire that's going on, and the fire spreads and it spreads. So global warming, if we just ignore it, becomes more difficult to change. Think back about Al Gore's. Look at the temperature of the Earth going straight up in the last 15, 20 years. Look at that, and then you kind of wake up to it. And so while the ice is melting, remember I said it falls into the dark ocean, and methane is released, which has tremendous effect, greenhouse effect. And now the melting of the ice is getting into the permafrost, which releases even more methane than the water hitting the ocean. Has even more effect. And when I saw from the helicopter flights over this, and Al Gore works, he walked on the ice. You can see the permafrost. And so as Martin Luther King, okay? Remember Martin Luther King, who really brought freedom to our previous slaves and other people. He says, the arc of the universe, the ark, remember Noah's Ark? The arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That's from Martin Luther King. And so it is with global environment. Now, people are starting to get it. We'll have another president someday who will wrap his arm around it and run with it and get involved, because it's a world thing. It's not just a U.S. thing. It's a world thing. No matter what you don't like about the agreements, you could always negotiate and trade off things to like they did with India. India was starting again more coal fields, and economically they just had to do it. But Al Gore and his friends, they negotiate at the Paris Agreement, and they arranged for $1 billion, I think it was $1 trillion loan from the World Bank for India, and India caved in and signed the agreement. That's called negotiation. And to solve a world problem, it will indeed take that. So please support political candidates who will do something about it in a reasonable manner and take it up maybe as an interest. So we have been relying on false information. The industry has put it out. No different than the diabetes epidemic, which is killing millions of people and injuring them too. It's industry supporting the price of sugar and lobbying money. Same thing. It's no different. And so you help me send the message, okay? And but we got to decide what we're going to do. So we cannot continue to eat the kind of meals we've been eating if we want to keep a reasonable planet, is what I'm saying. But the beauty, you say, Dr. Cashman, why are you interested in global warming? Because it's related to what we're eating. And if you watch what we're eating, we switch more to a vegetable type of eating, 70-80% of the time, will save the planet and get rid of diabetes and its 50 diseases at the same time. Wow, isn't that wonderful? That's great news. So they are related. So let's go back in history for a minute, okay? Degrees of change. 10 to 100,000 years ago, the world was 4 to 7 degrees colder. Yeah. And we had giant mastodons, mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, giant beavers, and the world was full of ice. Okay? Then 50 million years ago, the Arctic was tropical, rainforest everywhere, crocodiles, turtles, alligators, 200-pound penguins in Australia, and the oceans were hot tub, 5 to 7 degrees worse, indicating changes have occurred in the past. But they had little ability to do something about it, but now we can. So we've had around 5 mass extinctions. Remember, I told you I would, get to that. We've had 5 mass extinctions. All but one was climate change. Okay, remember the last one we had in Mexico was a comet really came in there, and so about 250 years ago we had a great dying. It was called the Great Dying 250 years ago, and it was a volcanic eruption, which can occur anytime. Okay, and it was huge. And the ocean temperatures rose 10 degrees, like that, just like that, and killed 90% of marine life and 70% of plant life. They've occurred in the past. Remember I mentioned that? So, but the Industrial Revolution began about 1750, and now they say we're in the Tropocene period, okay, since about 1750. So human activity has been the main source, okay? Since agriculture began, it has destroyed 83% of wild mammals. Yeah, just think of it. 83% since agriculture began, which is about 10,000 years ago. Okay. It's killed 50% of all the plants over a 10-year period, okay? So our planet right now is an animal farm. It's an animal farm. And 59% of the land mass is used to raise animals. 1/3 of all water goes to animals, okay? 70% of the antibiotics we make go to animals. Then we eat the animals, and we have the effects of antibiotics in our body, okay? 60% of animals are used for food. 30% of farmed animals for every human being eat animals. So in 1960, this is big, factory farms were born. Remember factory farms, I said the long troughs in the big buildings that we keep the chickens and the turkeys in. For example, be thousands of chickens in the same farm, barely 2 inches apart. What's the average life of a second chicken? 40 days. Yeah, about 40 days. And they don't have time enough even to stand up. They'll open the door in front and back and then call it organic. I mean, it's a joke. And they make them as fat as possible because that's what sells. And then you eat it, and what do you think? You're going to become skinny? Okay? There's a lot of fat in the chicken. Chickens are 40% fat. Yeah, it's true. And when you think of the cruelty, which I told you about, I'd have as, what am I saying? Okay? So our planet, it's on fire. And but the factory farm, remember how important that is. 2018, 99% of the animals eaten are born in factory farms who are getting fed what we decide they ought to eat, not they decide. It's not grass they're eating. They're eating modified foods is what they're eating, and hormones and pesticides. Yeah, when they'll take a cow, they'll have them graze 6 months grass, and they put 10 together in a fenced-in area to teach them to eat corn. And then they put them in a cage, and the trough goes by, and pesticides and herbicides, and they don't want them moving around and using up any energy, and then they slaughter them in a cruel manner, and then you eat them. Yeah, that's the way. That's reality for you. That's reality for you. So eating animal protein increases cancer rates times 4. You're much more likely to have cancer if you're eating meat 7 days a week. Also, meat products actually do increase the insulin level, which goes up with sugar, as you know. It also will go up some with animal meats. And so you can actually consume all the protein that you need from plants. A pound of broccoli has 3 times as much protein in it than a pound of beef. I'll admit, a pound of broccoli, how big is that? Okay. But I told you, plenty of protein in meat. See, all these things get broken down into amino acids, whether some plants or protein, it's the same. The same amino acids, about 22 of them, and 10 are essential. That means you got to eat them from something, take them in from nuts or guacamole. I had a guacamole toast this morning with good fats in them, for example. And so humans are adding to the greenhouse effect tremendously, okay? 10 times faster than a volcano. Remember the volcanoes? 2 of them came up and almost annihilated the earth. Well, humans, what they're doing increases greenhouse effects 10 times quicker, okay? So it's a feedback loop, okay? The albedo effect. The ice sheets, that's the albedo effect, reflect the sunlight. Dark oceans, which is what's occurring now, absorb the sunlight, okay? Okay, the other one reflected back to the sun, but if it goes, melts and goes into the oceans, the dark oceans, it absorbs, takes sunlight in, and raises the ocean temperature. So methane is 80% stronger than CO2 in the greenhouse effect. So that's the oceans, remember, goes to a methane instinct. Coal farming, for example, getting for energy, is actually cheaper than gas, but natural gas is not the answer. It's a bridge. It's not the answer. It's a bridge. It's a little cheaper. But solar energy, sun energy, these panels that we have, and wind, they are the answer. They're part of the answer. You know, we can eat more of a vegetable diet, drive less cars, maybe have battery cars, although batteries also have the energy story. So battery technology is improving, that we put the electricity in batteries, but the CAFE standards, which were used for energy, were turned off by Trump also. And the story of the Bushes is interesting. The first Bush, H.W. Bush, he was an environmentalist. He cared a lot. But the second Bush signed off the Kyoto Agreement that we had on the environment. Yeah, it was the lobbying people from Exxon and stuff that got to him. It's hard to believe he'd do this when his dad was an environmentalist. So who is leading our country? You got to pay attention to the environment and who we are electing for president. So in this next election, please consider the environment, and because the effects it'll have you or your children. Okay. So livestock is the biggest cause of methane emission. And animal agriculture accounts for 90% of the deforestation in Brazil. But again, you got to sympathize with the Brazilian president because he's got to give people a job and to make some money. So you have to be a bit open-minded about it. But trees are a carbon sink. In other words, they bring in carbon dioxide and reduce greenhouse gases. So plant a tree. But we're going to have to plant a lot of them to have a big effect. But at least you feel like you're doing something, and I have done that. So they absorb about 25% of the CO2 in the air, and which is and trees are 50% of the carbon story, more than all the fossil fuels the coal industry already has been, in essence, destroyed. We have presidents in Congress trying to promote it, and we feel sorry that people have some lost their jobs. But what we should be doing, though, instead of encouraging them, is to encourage them to become experts in solar plants, for example, in eating right, for example, and in wind energy, like they're doing in China, for example. China has a huge pollution problem, and you can go to some cities and you don't see the sky, and parts of India too, but that is changing. So there are parts of China where they've gotten big time into solar and windmill and water, for example, waterfalls also. But again, livestock's the biggest cause of methane emissions, also the biggest cause of nitrous oxide emission, which also affects the greenhouse effect. If cows, they're number 3 in greenhouse effect, behind, if all the cows in the world are the effects of the U.S. and China on the greenhouse, the people, okay? Cows are number 3, okay? So it's a big thing. The Worldwide Watch Institute, which is a big institute on global warming, say animals account for 51% of the emissions. 51%, that's huge. The quickest effect to climate change, though, is what we eat. What we eat. But you know what I like about that? It smells of opportunity. Yeah. In other words, we could change the way we eat. It would help the climate. It would make us a lot healthier. Type 2 diabetes would go away. We'd have 50 less diseases. We'd be emptying the hospitals. It'd be a better world on the outside and a better world on the inside. What a deal. What a deal. I really like that. And to be healthy, eat a plant-based diet. So not all actions are equal, okay? And so global conversion to wind and solar and water to save the earth probably costs $100 trillion, okay? Yeah. But the efforts will help a great deal, okay? And but the changes will occur quickly. Some things that the earth could be in serious trouble in 10, 20 years. Are they right? I don't know. Difference of opinion. I talked to my wife about it. She thought it would take, we wouldn't see it in our lifetime. I don't know. But our children, but you name names of some of my grandchildren, name them, they will see it. Maybe it will be quicker than we think. It's hard to say. And what are the four most things we could do? Eat a plant-based diet, okay? Avoid air travel. Yeah, air travel has a tremendous effect on the environment. And here's one that could be controversy about have fewer children, okay, because of the human effect on global warming. Well, I mean, it might be a point that maybe one or two is enough, okay? If it's going to run the earth, well, maybe you ought to pay attention to how many kids you got, okay? And life is not free. We have to participate in it a bit. And 85% of us drive to work, so that's a toughie to change. But you could take along the neighbors or make some arrangements to take other people with you when you go into work. And 21% of the time when we drive, it's personal. 29% of air travel is business, so some things are needed, And but let's look a minute on the pounds of CO2 associated with what we're eating. Beef is high, 6.61 pounds. Beef, very high in the amount of CO2 it produces. Cheese, 2.45, okay? Cows and milk. Pork, 1.72. Eggs, 0.89. Poultry, 1.26. Rice, 0.16. Okay? Legumes, 0.11. Potatoes, 0.03. Carrots, 0.07. You see the point of comparison, why the type of food that you're eating can make a huge effect on the environment. It's nice to see the figures, how high beef is. And so what's the CO2 footprint on the different nations? U.S., about 19.8 per year, the French, 6.6, Bangladesh, 0.29, okay, average 4.5. So what we're saying, the U.S. is extremely high in the CO2 footprint in the greenhouse effect. How we're eating, how we're traveling, type of food that we're eating has a huge effect on the global footprint. And I think, now we should pay some attention to it, okay? And but as the author of this book said, maybe not eat meat breakfast or lunch at least, you have some effect, but I say to you, just eat it occasionally. I'm used to it. I don't miss it. Some people have that Amani effect, I think it was called, the taste of meat. I don't seem to have it. I don't eat it. I don't crave it. There's some people crave meat. I don't crave it, and I'm 39 years old for the 44th time. It seems to be okay with me. No pills, okay. Play pickleball and tennis, maybe that's it. Take up tap dancing, maybe that's it. Okay, some exercise. And let's go back in history a little more. In 1988, it became before Congress, where he brought up the term global warming. He presented it at James Hansen, I think, a scientist, brought up, he coined the word global warming. Then President H.W. Bush, I mentioned this before, he knew a lot about the environment, and his presidency tried to do something about it, made you conscious about it. He said fighting the greenhouse effect is a worthwhile project. Okay. Then, so in 1987, we, with Canada, developed the Montreal Protocol. The Canadians were very interested in the environment, and we passed the Montreal Accords. Okay. But then Exxon began a disinformation project. They constantly put out false information. Sound a little similar to what's going on right now, through some of the websites. Every morning you look at it, the next 2 weeks later, oh, I said that. Oh, I'm not interested in that. And do a fact check. And I hear somebody on there in the morning, some of them evaluate the words that they said. Someone high in government and said they had calculated there had been over 10,000 lies. Yeah, I read that. I didn't say it. I read it more than once in books and heard it. Then Bush's son came along, and he got out of the Kyoto conference that we had agreed to affect global warming, and he pulled out of that. Again, some of these little excuses, manufactured by industry, and does anybody really care? Some people care. I care. Al Gore cares. Why don't you join the global effort? Incidentally, Al Gore does run these classes where to get people interested to be leaders in that. I think I'm going to join those groups. I'm going to look it up on the internet if I can somewhere where they're having a teaching course for a couple of days. I don't think you can do it online, but maybe you can. And because to me, global warming is related to my main focus right now, type 2 diabetes, and it's 50 diseases, because that can be prevented, stopped, and reversed. The two go together, the environment and what we're eating and all these diseases. And in France, they were going to impose a carbon tax, but the people started demonstrating so much. They had marches. And they decided not to impose it. But at least, people are here in the streets. Remember, I said I'm willing to listen to both sides of the issue. And we need to develop some knowledge. And another interesting thing was where we were going to launch a Discover satellite that would go around the Earth and keep track of the changes in the environment in the Earth. It was overruled by the Republican Congress. It didn't go up. But I'm happy to say, through the efforts of Al Gore in Congress and NASA, it's now in orbit, going around the Earth, recording all the changes, and also going around the sun. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, the Discover satellite. So take an interest in that. So we are mortgaging our children's future. Let's do something about it. And be open-minded. You get a different idea? Tell it to me. Another book you want me to read? That's fine. But I do come from a lot of information, so be prepared. And so the Chinese are changing. They're changing in India, and there are certain cities and states in the United States that are changing. Remember, I already mentioned Georgetown, Texas, and the mayor of that city. I saw him on TV, listened to this discussion, and I give my applause to him. So if the cities change, state change, California is changing, I think eventually it'll hit the presidency, and the whole country and the whole world eventually will change and save our planet. I'm optimistic. We will step up to bat. So thanks so much for watching this show, and be open-minded. I gladly have another one. Anyone wants to be interviewed, come see me, and I'll interview a different point of view. I'll have my point of view. You have your point of view. I'm sure there's some of you out there who know more than I do. I'd love to have you on the show here. And I frankly am pleased we had this, because it does relate to the type of food that you're eating, because I personally think it's easy to get rid of diabetes, for example, which is 50 diseases to it, or if you're overweight, by eating the right food, 70, 80% plant diet, a little bit organic meat if you have to, and you'll be well and live to be 100. and celebrate your 100th birthday. But I'm saying this, it's not that hard. But I think you have to show a love for your family, for humanity, and please join me in this effort. And I say, I love you all, so I'm doing this. If you see me, buy me a cup of coffee, or give me a hug, or I'll see you for free at the Three Rivers Pharmacy to get rid of diabetes every Friday. And look at some of my YouTube shows. There's about 1,000 on there, all on health. And I thank Public Access TV for this opportunity. I care about you. That's why I'm doing this. And I hope you like the picture in back of me, because I grew up in that park. I think it's Central Park, and in New York City. And where I played tennis and handball and took a walk around the reservoir. I love you. See you later.